So, home, when you hear that word, it's not likely that you don't have some kind of an emotional reaction to it. But even for those who may have had a terrible home as a child, the concept of home is so powerful that instead of equating home with a capital H with something negative, we say things instead like, I feel as if I never had a home. Home is something we all seek. Some of us do not know that. Some of us are home and have not considered what that means. So let us go then and make our visit home. When I Google home, a picture of my house, yes, my house, that the Google car took a picture of, actually appears right before my eyes. I guess this tells me when it is, it's 2014, that my computer immediately interprets that maybe that's what I meant by Googling home. While I appreciate Google's efforts, it doesn't really tell me where home is. It just really tells me where my house is. As for time, I already know that the present is always home. So you are always home in time, wherever you are. But the phrase home in time means something else, or does it? That makes me wonder why so few people take advantage of that, always being home wherever you are, because whenever can only be now. We can only think about the past and the future. Are you confused? I'll get into it maybe a little more later. Maybe. As a word, home is defined thus. I'm going to say this a little bit slowly because I think, as you read dictionary definitions, sometimes they're innocently pregnant with meaning. As a noun, the place where one lives permanently, especially as a member of a family or household. I was 19 when I left home and went to college. This was in the dictionary, but that's also true about me. More the family or social unit occupying a home, he came from a good home and was well educated. Let's think about home and family. We have a similar emotional reaction to family, good or bad, as we do to home. If we've had a bad family life, we tend to say things like, I feel as if I never had a family, or upon moving away, we say, my friends are my real family. Home and family are inextricable. We tend to think of our pets as our family and even our neighbors, as well as our relatives with whom we live. Now this is interesting, definition 2. Home is a place where something flourishes, is most typically found or from which it originates. Piedmont is the home of Italy's finest red wines. I think that's an opinion, but synonyms, it was in the dictionary, but synonyms, origin, source, cradle, fount, fountainhead. Now we're really getting somewhere with this definition thing. Source, cradle, fount, fountainhead, source. When I was 21 and going to college, I had a 47-year-old PhD student roommate named Joyce. Joyce was a free spirit. She had 4 children and had had 5 husbands. She was single when I met her. She kept company with a 30-year-old minister from Buffalo who used to come over to spend the night with her. I loved her. She didn't ever mention God, but she mentioned something she called the source, with a capital S, she said. We all return to the source, Rob. She used to stretch out my name like Mary Tyler Moore did in the Dick Van Dyke Show. I don't really know why. Anyway, back then, I might have been known to partake in, well, maybe smoking a little bit of funny tobacco. At those times, I thought I knew just what she meant by that. Then years later, I was like, no, it was what you were doing at the time. But now I think I might be understanding again what she was talking about. So back to some of the definitions. 3, an institution for people needing professional care or supervision. An old people's home. Synonyms: institution, nursing home, retirement home, rest home. Okay, we've arrived at something with a truly negative connotation, but why? The use of the term home here is like trying to put lipstick on a pig. These places are not home. They can symbolize loss of home, loss of independence. This doesn't mean a retirement community, though. The community, or the good places we retire to, we don't try and dress up that way. They call it community. Communities are where we have our homes, but homes are personal. There's something we make, so someone I don't know can't make a home for me the same way parents can make a home for children. That home wouldn't be mine, but there can be a collection of the homes in the midst of which I would like to make my home. Definition of 4, sports. I was going to skip this, but then I read it. Home is the goal or endpoint, the place where a player is free from attack. As in lacrosse, each of the 3 players stationed nearest their opponent's goal. So when we play, we take this allegoric journey and travel away and return home to be safe. It's stuff like this that makes me feel like I can get stoned without chemical help. Are you serious? So our mass public spectacle games draw us in to watch this allegoric journey over and over again. Our movement to ecstasy watching a player arrive home in baseball is the excitement we expect to feel when we return home. Perhaps when we return home to the source. It doesn't matter what you believe, but why are these powerful ideas? In Aaron Copland's opera, The Tenderland, a young woman strikes out from home on the frontier. She is not only leaving, but she is expanding the frontier itself. Despite the profession many young single women ended with in those days, many found the family and the home they were seeking because they made it out of nothing. At the risk of sounding heterosexist, men can wander endlessly. It is that coming together that creates family, and that's in all of its form, from brother and sister to husband and wife to same-sex couples to friend and confidant. It ultimately brings us home. Right now, I'm hoping that you really didn't seriously think a gay man was going to preach a sermon about home and not mention Dorothy Gale. That's right, the Wizard of Oz. We all know that in the end, Glenda tells Dorothy that she had the power to go home all the time. But then why have an adventure? Because we're not ready to go home until we do. Until we learn the lessons we need to. Whether we are reincarnated for lifetime after lifetime to learn those lessons, or we are simply wondering which way Kansas is after burning our wicked witch, we need to accomplish something while we're out. That may mean feeding the hungry or making amends with a neighbor or family member. It all has to do with forgiveness and help for being just what we are, human. It may be a little more complicated than you think, this thing we call home. Home is always the place where we are or to which we are headed. I'll say it again. Home is always the place where we are or to which we are headed. Ultimately, if we head out to the store or on vacation or a business trip, we will come home. Unless we are homeless, having a bigger home does not necessarily mean we're homeless. Homeless is a label we put on people who don't keep going back to the same place all the time. But even nomads have patterns and cycles. For them, the pattern and cycle itself is home. Gay men and lesbians have a history of being court jesters, healers, teachers, counselors, clergy, and merchants, making home for someone else, but often not themselves. They have always made a place in the human web. Now we create a home of our own, but we have not abandoned the old ways or professions. If you know a bitter gay person, be gentle. The bitterness is in being told that there is no home for us. So we become home voyeurs. Some of us rejoice. That time is over. But like Dorothy, we always had the power to go home. We can stop identifying with that witch as our own destruction. While we may have a witch to burn, we are not that witch. But that doesn't mean you can leave. My little party is just beginning. Actually, there's not much left to my speech today. Still, it seems a custom when we speak from the pulpit for the first time at UUCSV to say a little bit how we fit into our UU picture. What's our angle in religion and spirituality, if you will? So here it is for me. If you flip over your bulletin and look, I'm pretty sure that it's the last bulleted point under the living tradition we share draws from many sources. Now, so even though I considered myself more or less a pagan, I also draw upon and view figures like Jesus actually as rebel rousers that dared to say, yes, you have your religion, but there's way more to it. We keep losing grasp on concepts like home. And yes, I am an unapologetic mystic. And again, for the third time, that's with a capital M. Why? Because we just don't know it all. We really don't know much at all. We just think we do. We're scared if there's far more to the greatness of being than we realize. The mystical is the only door to the rest. So in telling my story and coming back home to the Susquehanna Valley, the idea struck me one day as I was looking for yet another job and traveling to places like Connecticut just about this time. Anne called me one day, excited about, well, a lot of things. You know how Anne gets. One of them was Bill's OWL class. But this was more than a year before it started. I Skyped with her to discuss possibilities. If you haven't noticed, one of Anne's favorite things to do is discuss possibilities. She hadn't dressed or combed her hair when we Skyped. I really was visiting her in her home. For 2.5 years, I had read her daily devotion every day. I had left the UU Church 2 years before I left Central Susquehanna, but Anne kept me in the loop. She kept me in the family, and she nurtured the seed that was home. When that sapling was ready, I knew we had to get the roots back into home soil before it was too late. There became an urgency to return, and we worked, as perhaps did the angels, to come back. But just as many things fell into place as we worked to bring about. So I feel I would be ignorant and arrogant to claim credit when clearly something else was at work. We UUs call it the web. We traveled back and forth several times. When I was coming to move into a friend's house in Paxinus, I remember coming off Route 230 onto Route 15 on the south branch of the Susquehanna. When I looked over at the river and passed by the Ranch House restaurant, something happened. I knew I was finally back home. The release came, as it often does, in tears, but the relaxation of my body was real. Home is something palpable. It isn't just a concept or an idea. I could feel it. After Memorial Day in September, we will come home to UUCSV with the water communion service. We bring quite a bit of virtual water to our service for water communion and talk about where we have traveled. But if you still have travels this summer, even if it is local, I'm suggesting that you look at a map, get off the highway, and go down to the water. Wherever you are, look around you in these places. We are all visiting someone else's home. Buy some little mason jars and take a Sharpie pen. When you walk down to the water to scoop it up, have someone take a picture. Share. Feel the earth and the force of the water. The currents carry us both away from and toward one another. So we have traveled far to come home. If you still need to travel, I wish you Godspeed. If you know that you are already home, simply take off your shoes and stay a while. If we can say that the world religions are seeking home for the soul, home for the truth of our human existence, where is home? So in the end, what is home to a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, or a Wiccan? Do atheists have a spiritual home? Well, look around you. You are home. Blessed be.
Our closing words: teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy